So if you grew up a boomer or an Xer, you really grew up on Winnie the Pooh's cartoons and books through the years. Millennials and younger, not so much, even though they're available still on streaming services. Winnie the Pooh was that cute little teddy bear that's yellow and wore the red shirt with no pants and ate all the honey, and we thought was such a cute little thing, and in our childlike mind it was. Until, as you know, as we get older, we start looking at things through the lens of maturity and lessons that we've learned in life, some good and some not so good. So a couple years ago, I'm sitting there watching something, and a Winnie the Pooh cartoon, a clip, pulled up. And I'm looking at it now, as I said, through the eyes of an adult. And I realized Winnie the Pooh was a user. So Winnie the Pooh was created by Alan Milner, a guy, British writer who created the character from his son, whose actual name is Christopher Robin, and his plethora of stuffed animals that he had in his room, a teddy bear, a tiger, a rabbit, an owl, all of them. And so realizing an adult wrote this story, as I'm an adult now, you realizing he probably wrote the people in his life. So what I mean by Winnie the Pooh was a user. So if you remember how Winnie the Pooh would always eat his honey and never share it, only when it was called to his attention that he was being stingy. But he would go over to other people's house, eat all their honey, and go home. Even when they came to his house, Winnie the Pooh would literally hide his honey so he wouldn't have to give anybody any. But somehow, he would seem to be such a nice and decent character when he was a user. Then you had the rest of his cast of characters that lived in the 100-acre woods. You had Owl the owl, Piglet the piglet, Rabbit the rabbit, Tigger the tiger, along with Kanga and Roo, a mom and son kangaroo team. And when you start to look at all of them and the reasons we didn't like them as kids, then you realize who they are now as adults. So the owl was this wise owl who they always went to for advice, but half the time the advice wasn't good. But they just thought it was because he was older and supposed to be more mature, so he would give it in such a sage way. Then you had Tigger, who was borderline ADD and egotistical. Because remember how Tigger used to always say, oh, I can do that, I can do this, I can do that, I can do this, but couldn't do none of it and never came through. But he was always bragging or talking about himself in the third person. Then you had Eeyore, who I forgot, the donkey, who was depressed. He was always, woe is me, losing his tail, going through the motions. He would only go with them because he figured they would drag and beg him to go. So he was like, well, I might as well go. But he was always walking around down. Then we had Piglet, who was full of anxiety and a people pleaser. Remember how when Pooh would come to Piglet's house, he would always get anxious and start hiding stuff or cleaning up stuff or trying to do stuff because Pooh would always end up getting Piglet into something. And Piglet wanted to please everyone around him. Then you had Rabbit, who we thought was just so stern and he was like a parent and he didn't want to have fun when he was the one making sure he planted plants so they can have food, make sure he kept his house clean, try to keep everyone on the straight and narrow. But he was a type A personality. He didn't even want to admit half the time he was missing empathy in half his plans. That's why they would never follow through. I said, but you mainly had Kanga and Roo, which leads me to the only female in the 100-acre woods, which was Kanga, the mom. And she was the one who was literally trying to make them see their ways or be friends and give them advice and carrying them along the way, as we know a lot of good women do, along with raising her son, Roo. So when you look back at these cast of characters and you realize these people had some serious issues, or these animals had some serious issues, but they are people that we know now. When you look at the people-pleasing Piglet, there was literally an episode where Owl lost his home and Eeyore gave Piglet's house to Owl. And you know what Piglet did? He felt bad about it and he was like, well, but it's my home. But he ended up walking away and giving it to Owl to say, here, friend, have my home, and went and lived with Winnie the Pooh. How you give somebody your whole house and in the name of friendship after somebody else gave them your house? Then you had Eeyore. If you look back, Eeyore was illiterate. He didn't want to admit he was illiterate, but he always wanted to say, oh, y'all can't do stuff as good as I can while being depressed. Instead of he getting help for his flaws, he just wanted to mask it and always wanted to bring everybody down around him. Then you had Winnie the Pooh, someone who was a user. And he only would be a friend to you when it means you would sit there and listen to him wax on about his poetry or share your honey, which he would eat all the time and leave and go home. I said, so you look at all these cast of characters and you like, what are we doing now when we know these people that are in our lives who are like this? I said, if Rabbit was a good leader, he would have known that you have to have empathy for the people around you and understanding that they may not know what you know. So by them not knowing what you know, they need you to teach them how to be better. And sometimes they may not listen. They may just want to play all day like they all wanted to do. Or Tigger needed to understand that he didn't always have to be so egotistical and feel insecure that he didn't know everything or couldn't do things other people did because they were still his friends. And Eeyore, if he'd have gotten out his own way and accepted his flaws, he could have in turn become a better person and probably wouldn't have been so depressed all the time and enjoy what everyone else was doing. And if Winnie wasn't such a user while masking it in the term of friendship just because he would help every now and then when it was pulled to his attention, he would end up being a better person. And Piglet, if he wasn't such a people pleaser and understanding that they liked him for who he was or to remove himself from people who didn't, he would have still had his home instead of having to give it to Owl. And as Owl, as we know, a lot of older people feel like they can't learn anything and they know everything and they don't want to apologize. But if some of our elders understood that you may need to apologize for things you didn't know to your children, to your family, and still be willing to learn, you would have a lot better life at the end of your life, so to speak. Not to say y'all gonna die anytime soon, but you know what I mean. You at the latter end, not at the beginning. But you would have a better way of living if you accepted that there are things you may not have known and things that are better now than what they were when you were born. So that all goes down to, and let's not forget Kanga, the woman who was trying to make sure everybody was good and putting out with all the shenanigans and still helping out and always bringing them around to being better animals. Sometimes as women, you got to take care of yourself and back away. Or you be like Christopher Robin, who was the only human in the 100-acre woods. He played with them when he needed to play with them. He accepted them for who they were, as they all did, accepting each other. But sometimes accepting everything and not pointing out someone's issues, you keep enabling them to be the people they are. But he accepted and loved them while trying to correct them lovingly. But when he grew up, he also knew when it was time to leave the 100-acre woods. So some of us have to get to a place where we can grow up and leave the 100-acre woods, or if we decide to stay in the 100-acre woods, be able to point our friends and family flaws out, even our jobs, even our neighbors, with love, care, and understanding. And when that doesn't happen, sometimes you got to grow up and leave the 100-acre woods. Y'all have a good day.